Josh and Frankie. What a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, Primates! You found Primus Tracks. Congratulations! There are many other places to find us, such as at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Threads. PrimusTracksPod@gmail.com is the email address. And there is a Facebook page appropriately titled Primus Tracks. Speaking of that page, I'm Josh, by the way. That page is run by my pal, all the way from the 39th floor of Primus Tracks Towers in Mexico City. I heard through the electric grapevine that they beefed up security around there. It's Frankie Berestein!
Hi, Josh. Yes, it's been busy over here with all the modifications that had to be done in order to house such a unique item.
Yes, a lot of retinal scans, I imagine, being installed. You might be wondering, what could be so damn important at Primus Tracks Towers that Frankie would resort to such measures? Well, we're here to talk about that today. It is actually what I would term a pretty big day here at Primus Tracks. And Frankie, I think you should tell the story because this particular item is now in your possession.
Josh, I am incredibly thrilled to announce that the Primate 1984 demo tape, the very first thing that Les ever did, is now in my collection. This predates absolutely everything. Suck on This, Sausage, Sucking Songs. So this is where the story begins. This is the Big Bang of Primus. This is primordial Primus at its very finest example.
Wow! This is huge news. I thought maybe you just found... This is, of course, quite a find. This 1984 tape, we're just calling it Primate, the Primate demo, right? Because that was the band's name before they were, you could say, coerced into changing it, albeit through nefarious means by the guy who misrepresented himself as a lawyer. Anyhow, this is the first tape that Les ever put down with the name Primus on it, and it has the first 4 songs ever written for Primus. This demo is quite a rare bird, Frankie. I think this is the second one we've seen in years and years and years and years of keeping track of this sort of thing.
I would say that prior to 2022, we had never seen what it looked like, and we were completely oblivious to its track list. So I think we speculated for a long time that there was a tape which included the ska version of Too Many Puppies, right? Or the fast version of Too Many Puppies.
Yep.
But I mean, in my mind, that was probably like a blank promotional tape or something. So we had never actually seen the artwork or what the tape looked like with its label. So that was quite a revelation that came about 2 years ago. And it's important to extend some gratitude to our buddy Levi, because we owe this discovery to him, as he's the one who actually unearthed the tape at that, is it called like a legacy sale?
Oh, the estate sale for Sandy Perlman, yeah. And we had spoken about that in previous episodes about this tape being recovered from the estate of Sandy Perlman. Recovered as if it was repossessed. No, but it was purchased from the estate of Sandy Perlman. I believe we spoke about this in our episode about Blind Illusion, because Blind Illusion was recording their album for Combat Records in 1987 or so, I want to say. In the next studio space over was Blue Oyster Cult, who was doing a record produced by Sandy Perlman. Les, when he came in to track his bass parts, of course he would slip a tape over to them. Mark Biederman, of course, the lead for Blind Illusion, guested on that Blue Oyster Cult record. I'm sure Les handed him a tape and said, "No, I'm just going to hand this to Sandy Perlman, see what he thinks." So the dots all connected well after the fact. And yeah, we didn't have a ton of information at the time, but now it's pretty clear that the Primate tape, there's more than a few of them out there. Maybe more will begin to surface.
As time goes by, I think, and considering what they have sold for on the record, what is available publicly, I think that will motivate whoever has held on to a copy for all these years to potentially part with it. What I do want to highlight, these are just things that are coming to my mind. The first thing that I want to highlight is that people are familiar with this quick scat tinted version of Too Many Puppies because of the way that it was performed live in some of the early recordings that are available. Right. However, the actual demo had never been heard before until we acquired this tape. So when people say, oh yes, I've heard that ska version of Too Many Puppies, well, yes, you have heard how it was performed live, but you have not heard the actual demo, which is included in this tape, which, by the way, has a pretty mythical and legendary status because it's the song that Les mentions as the one that he was too embarrassed to sing in his apartment, right? So that's why he loaned the keys so he would go across the street to the church to perform it there. When we listen to Too Many Puppies on this tape, we're actually listening to Les singing at church.
Possibly one of the only times in his life he's ever sung inside of a church, I have to imagine. Yeah, there's a lot going on with this tape. By the way, if you want to see visuals of it, at Primus Tracks on Instagram or the Facebook page, we've got images of the J card and the tape, so you can see what it looked like in 1984, and I suppose now. It's wonderful that your copy appears to be in fantastic shape. It's withstood the test of time.
That's something that I feel very lucky about. It's in really good shape, considering it's a 40-year-old artifact that exchanged hands God knows how many times. and it's complete because our good pal Matt Weinegar is one of 3 known owners of the tape, but his is missing the J card, sadly.
Yeah, so even the boy wonder is lagging behind you a bit there, Frankie. As you told him, you're tape buddies now. Buddies forever.
Exactly.
Weinegar's got one. They will fetch quite a price out there in the wild. Now, Frankie came to me and said, I have this opportunity for the tape, and I just told him, buy it. I also offered to kick in $20, which is my limit for these kind of artifacts. And when you told me what you paid for it, Frankie, I was astonished. $30. Whew, that is so far beyond my budget. I just applaud you for taking that dive, that financial risk on the tape.
Another thing that I would like to highlight, Josh, is that if you think about any emerging artist or band self-releasing tapes and recording demos by themselves with home equipment, the first thing that comes to mind is a low fidelity recording with very questionable quality, right?
Yes, indeed. Especially in 1984.
So what I find particularly surprising about the Primate tape is just how good it sounds. Of course, it does not match the standards of a studio release, but it sounds surprisingly clean and detailed for something of its time and also the way that it was recorded. So I don't know how Les did it, but he created a great quality product with incredibly sparse resources.
Right. As he details in the Over the Electric Grapevine book, he had his Fostex recorder, and he had a Linn drum machine that he bought for $1,500 in 1984, which is an astronomical sum for that time.
But he got it for half the price, right?
Well, it was, I believe retail was $3,000 and he got it for $1,500. He paid a mint for that drum machine, a drum machine. Now, of course, you just download Fruity Loops with some 808 packs, forge the serial to get the full Fruity Loops, and you're in. Anyway, he had the Fostex recorder. He had the Linn drum machine. He clearly had a mic or two. He had his bass and his amp set up. As I recall, at least for Too Many Puppies, he borrowed Ray Wing's guitar to record the guitar part before Todd Huth entered the scene and started laying down some guitar parts for the other tunes. So he did have a home recording setup to a degree, and I suppose he maximized it in typical thrifty Claypool fashion. And to know that started so early is so funny to me, but it's so telling, particularly when you see where they go later on with doing it themselves at Rancho Relaxo for however many years at this point that Les has been doing that, and that he loves talking about cruising Craigslist for cheap gear and just Frankensteining things as much as he can. And then what Matt told us when they were making Frizzle Fry, and they would record over flubs or outtakes because the tape was expensive. It all adds up at this point. This is a guy who had to be extremely economical, and I think once that's baked in, you don't lose that sensibility, which I can certainly identify with, because as I said, I set my budget for these legendary things at $20, and if I can't get it for $20, Frankie, some money bags from Mexico City swoops in with $30, and I'm out of luck. Really interesting that that's all those habits started at such a young age for Les as he was just getting into this thing.
Let's talk about the artwork.
Please.
I think it's simply fabulous. We have these anatomical schoolbook kind of affair illustrations of the two characters named Hector and Louis, who would go on to become, many years later, the publishing company for the Riddles Are Abound Tonight album. So once again, the dots connect, right? Everything finds its way back again with Les.
Yep. In your sausage liner notes, you will see Hector and Louis Publishing, under which they published the sausage record. There it is. There's more dots connected. Mysteries solved.
I don't know if Les always had the vision of what the J card would look like, or if it's kind of a direct response to what happened with the name modification prior to the release of this tape. Like, okay, we can no longer go by Primate. We have a new name. However, basically the main theme, right?
You can't stop me from putting Primates on the cover of my demo.
Exactly.
But I would imagine...
I'm inclined to believe that the man is Hector and the chimp is Louis.
I will go with that as well, because Hector and Louis, and when you look at the artwork left to right, human, chimp,
it makes sense.
What I really like about it, this cover, and remember you can go see it at Primus Tracks on Instagram or the Facebook page, the red coloring on both of them is certainly kind of harsh, and it just smacks of DIY, which I really appreciate. But I also like the surface on which they're standing, which gives that illusion of depth. I think that's it's very effective. It's simple yet telling.
And the greatest thing about the J card is that I think it's really hard to identify that in the photographs. But when you're actually holding the tape in your hand and you run your fingers by the J card, you discover that both the title, Primus, and the characters are kind of embossed on the J card. So it's definitely a do-it-yourself affair, because I imagine that Les either stenciled the J cards, or it was done in such a way that each tape could potentially be unique in terms of the artwork, right?
Is the paper itself embossed, like you can see it raised with Primus, or did he use some kind of stamp and paint application?
I'm not sure which, but it's definitely not flat.
Okay.
I mean,
so he must have stenciled it on there and done some brushing or spraying on. Wow.
Yeah, there's definitely kind of a raised texture on the text and the characters.
Oh, very cool. I just figured he went for the black and white copies and then colored it in with red later, because in 1984, color copies would have run you a fortune. And this is a guy on a budget trying to get a tape out there. So.
Now, in terms of the distribution, Josh, here's some very interesting context to provide some history to the tape. We know that Les created the songs. Thanks to Peter, we discovered that Les showed the tape to him in order to convince him to join the band as the drummer, correct?
So when these songs were recorded, there's the Lynn drum machine on display.
Yeah.
Peter Libby is not yet in the band, but this is the tape. And by the way, we talked to Peter Libby, and that episode's coming next week, I think. So
Peter liked what he heard.
Yeah.
He agreed to join the band. And so by the time that Les made the artwork for the tape, Peter had joined the band. So that is reflective in the credits that you see on the tape, which are Les Claypool, Todd Hood on guitar, and Peter Libby on drums.
Right.
However, that could be misleading if you're not familiar with the story, because that could give you the idea that that is the lineup which performed on the tape, but it's not.
Right.
So the tape is basically Les by himself with a drum machine.
I think that's the case for Puppies, but I do believe Todd is on the other 3 tracks.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Right. No Peter Libby until on a recording until later.
So shortly after the creation of the tape, Primus, having recently modified their name, would go on to perform their first ever concert at the Mabuhay Gardens in San Francisco. We have no information available about the show in terms of number of attendants, set list, or any other information, except that Mark Edgar was the drummer for the show, I believe, as you discovered, Josh. And this is absolutely fabulous. Les's mother was at the show as well, walking around with a clipboard, getting details from the attendants so she could put them on a mailing list and inform them about future performances. Whomever attended the Mabuhay Gardens Primus debut concert...
Gosh, 40 years ago, Frankie. What a way to celebrate by finding this tape again.
Yeah.
Mark Edgar was the drummer for that first performance, and Les does say in the Grapevine book, Edgar didn't last that long in Primus because they felt, or they had different tastes in music. They just weren't gelling from a philosophical and musical standpoint, and they soon parted ways. And that gave Peter Libby the opportunity to step in when Les showed him the tape, offered him the gig.
Imagine if we had just any kind of footage of that show. That would be remarkable.
Somewhere, somebody has a really lousy recording of it, and I want to hear it. Les did say in the book that about 20 people were there. So they had a decent, they already had a bit of a following at that point.
Yeah.
That is a good turnout, especially when your mom's going around collecting contact information. That's really cool, actually. Good on her for supporting her boy as he embarks on this quest to make a career in music. And I'm sure, 1,000% sure, after that first gig, they didn't really think much of it at that point. But everybody starts somewhere. And
just like any unique and historical artifact, Josh, even though it is now in our possession, there are still more questions than answers. So we know that they performed that show, the tape was distributed. However, we don't know how many tapes Les made. Of course, the intention was both to sell them at shows and try to distribute them at radio stations, right? Right. And we do know that one of these tapes made its way to good old Big Rick Stewart, who ended up playing Prelude to Fear, the rendition that appears on this tape on local radio there in San Francisco. I think he played it quite a few times. And so Primus was already starting to gain traction that early on in its existence. And I mean, considering that it was the first ever release and it was self-made, we could just throw numbers at the wall, but I think we will never know exactly how many of them were made and how many of them survived the passing of time. But I mean, if we take into account that in a time span of 40 years, we have only seen 2, and that it was only discovered until a couple of years ago, I mean, this is like a completely wild guess, but I would venture to say that there can't be more than a handful of them still existing in the world. I mean, we're not talking about an item that exists in hundreds of units.
Yeah, Les didn't number them, notarize them, microchip them, unfortunately, but I would wager there's a couple dozen sitting in boxes in basements or storage units around the United States or even around the world just waiting to be rediscovered. So hit those flea markets, kids. You never know.
Would you like to go over what the tape contains?
I think these titles will be familiar to some and ring a bell for others. We have 4 tracks here on the Primate demo from 1984. The first 4 songs Les ever did for Primus. Track 1, Prelude to Fear. The second song he ever wrote for Primus is the first track. The second track has a very interesting name, Frankie. It's called Creating, Example 1.
Which means there could have been other examples at the time.
Yes, was this to be the first in a series of examples of creating? Was this the Proto-Fisherman's Chronicles, perchance? A series of tracks? Is this Les's Unforgiven before he knew about the Unforgiven? That's a really interesting title. The third track is titled Chattering Song, and I did not mispronounce that. CH, Chattering Song. The light's going on for many of you listening right now. And finally, the fourth track is the first song Les ever wrote for Primus, and it is indeed titled Too Many Puppies. So we have 4 tracks checking in around 17 minutes, the first Primus effort ever put out to the public in any way, shape, or form. I will say this, we have reached out to management to see what they would like to do with this tape, at least the audio of the tape. We're going to
only the audio.
Only the audio. What if Les comes to your house and knocks you down and takes it?
Oh my God, I don't know. I don't know how I would react to Les asking for the tape. It would be so awkward because I would have to turn him down. My tomb will have to be raided if somebody wants to grab the tapes.
Paging Lara Croft to the Primus desk. We'll play little snippets of each, but don't expect it on the whole thing on YouTube tomorrow.
At this point, I would like to emphasize, we are not hoarding. Josh and I have never hoarded anything out of spite.
We'll take our time with it. Do it right. You guys will hear it eventually. I do have a question for you, Frankie, and it's this.
Do you have the damn tape?
I know you do. I did want to peel back the curtain a bit for everybody, Frankie, because the discussions you had with the seller, for some reason, I don't know why you recorded them and then put music to them, but we should hear a portion of your negotiation with the seller. Frankie, you are quite an intimidating bargaining presence here in this audio.
Do you have the tape?
As I said, I may have located it.
Do you have the damn tape?
I'll know more when we next meet.
I do not negotiate. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
I don't think you do. I don't think you understand at all.
Jeez, Frankie.
That is precisely how you obtain a Primus demo tape.
Playing hardball. How many packs of cigarettes did you go through while you were negotiating? Goodness me. Let's sample these tracks. Let's do this. Before we do that, quickly, everybody's going, get to the tape. You know what? Yeah, everybody's saying this.
Do you have the damn tape?
Well, we do. I do want to help confirm the timeline of drummers as well. Now, I know everybody, Frankie, is sitting there saying,
do you have the damn tape?
Yes, and we're going to play it in a moment. However, I do want to clear up the timeline of drummers because it is still murky for a lot of people. And you will find these names, the names that you see on the thank yous on the back of the Suck on This record in the credits are all former members of Primus, just about. So you obviously Todd Huth. Weirdly, no Lynn drum machine is thanked, but you do have thanks to the first 3 drummers of Primus, as well as the rest that predate Tim Alexander. Obviously, the first Primus drummer was the Lynn drum machine, as evidenced by this tape. Perm Parker was next. Les actually let him live in his apartment, and that arrangement quickly fizzled. Perm couldn't get it together to drum for Primus. And that's when Mark Edgar stepped in for the first live gig. We actually don't know how many gigs Mark played. I'm guessing it was more than the first, but not too many before he gave up the chair and Peter Libby stepped in. So those are your first 4 Primus drummers.
Just one last thing before you hit play, Josh.
Oh my goodness.
You have the damn tape!
I just wanted to highlight that back in 2019, when Todd Huth was interviewed on the radio and he shared the Welcome to This World demo, that was a huge revelation for multiple factors. First of all, because it confirmed the existence of yet another tape that we were not previously aware of.
At the time, yeah.
At the time. And it was also fascinating because it gave us a peek into how the sound of not only the band, but that particular song evolved over the years. And it also pretty much confirmed that it was part of their live repertoire at the time. We'll go deeper into that when we get to that tape. However, I just want to highlight that for those who have already heard the Welcome to This World demo will be familiar with something that Les incorporated into the Prelude to Fear demo. So it's basically kind of the same skit. It's kind of the same vignette, which I find particularly interesting because it also speaks of the theatricality that was already part of Les as an artist. I imagine that for most emerging artists, when they are introducing their music into the world, they must be eager for people to just hear the first note of whatever they have to play, right? However, Les takes his time by sampling this little sketch before the actual song begins. Yeah. And that is, Josh, also another mystery because we don't know who the people are speaking in the sketch.
Should we play that part for the good people?
Sure.
Yeah, what do you want?
Yeah, what's a primate?
What's a primate? I have to pause it there because that first vocal utterance, first of all, the was there from the beginning, which is really cool. But is that vocal delivery of the word possibilities 100% David Byrne, 99.9? What's the percentage there, Frankie?
I would say the talking heads factor runs extremely high in the DNA of these performances.
That's part of the reason we did a Talking Heads Primus DNA episode. It is so prevalent. A couple of things on display there for those of you familiar with the sausage recording of Prelude to Fear from 1994. Clearly, the drum machine provides a completely different vibe to this. It's almost like a dance number as opposed to what Jay Lane does with the tune, of course. The bass line is much more articulated. And clearer to hear.
Yeah.
And yeah, Todd's guitar part almost fully formed as you hear it on the Sausage record. And he's doing that really cool Merle Travis pickin', hybrid pickin' in 84. So his style is already pretty well defined, it seems.
It might be a generational thing because I think everyone gets something different out of it. Talking Heads is the first thing that comes to mind for some people. But in my case, when I hear that guitar, it reminds me a lot of the credits of the intro and the closing of the Ren and Stimpy cartoon.
That's not a connection I would have made. That's great. Well, we know that Primus is often called cartoon music, so why not? It is off the wall. It is strange. Bent in its own way. So Prelude to Fear kicks it off, the second ever song Les put together for Primus. And that's a little taste. We're off to a weird start, and I love it. I should have cautioned everybody to have a seat, pull over the car, put on headphones, and shut out the world for a little bit, because some of these things might blow your little Primus mind.
They will shock you. They will baffle you.
I was in that very realm not long after I heard this for the first time. How about Creating Example 1? The hell kind of title is that? If you think you know what Creating Example 1 would become later, please raise your hand. Frankie, your hand's not raised. All right. Well, let's see if you can figure it out. Oh, he does know. All right. That was mostly for the listeners.
I thought you were just addressing the audience.
That sound, man.
Touch my hand or speak words to me to invade the space would irritate.
I can perfectly picture the new romantics nodding their heads in approval as they dance to the beat of that song at a London nightclub. It has such a new wave quality to it, which makes perfect sense, because in the book, Les mentions that he would practice with Elvis Costello songs. And we know that Elvis Costello was one of the greatest examples of new wave at the beginning of his career.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he said he took singing lessons. The vocal teacher, for some reason, she would encourage him to remove his shirt when singing Elvis Costello songs.
And that's a habit that stuck around, as we can see from live footage of the early show.
Yeah, he could really fill his lungs when he wasn't clothed from the waist up. Yeah, you know when he got it flaunted.
It's a really great rendition of the song, because the guitar has this ethereal, eerie, it just sets it completely apart from what we were getting further down the line with the Sausage record. I would say that recreating on the Riddles album, we refer to it as frenetic, restless, stop-start example of the kind of approach that Les had. But Creating Example 1, I would call it ominous.
Ominous is a good word for it. That cleaner guitar, just that constant drum beat, because remember, it's a drum machine, and they're not doing any real special programming there. It changes the complex of the tune immensely, and it's so different to hear these, because 3 of these tunes end up on the Sausage record, and Jay Lane, obviously a monster drummer, can groove like nobody's business, murders every hi-hat he's ever encountered. You don't hear any of that here. And so that interplay between Les's bass and the human drummer is missing. It's more, you're right, it's not as tight. I'll just say it's different. The other thing I wrote in my notes is that whammy, because remember, he's holding that whammy bar pretty much the whole time. Some of those embellishments sound 100% like 1970s Stanley Clarke.
Yeah,
from some of his records. It just he's borrowing that from Stanley, even tone wise. Obviously, he's playing as Carl here.
Yeah,
right?
To anticipate a question that I guess a lot of listeners might have as they are being privy to what these songs sound like for the first time, Josh. Mm-hmm. What bass do you think Les used for the recording?
Isn't he playing as Carl?
That's what it sounds like to me.
It's got to be. I can't imagine he's playing anything else. He had that thing pretty early, and it was his only bass for many, many years. Obviously, Creating Example 1 is the primordial version of Recreating. So I thought it was pretty clever that they went with Recreating on the Sausage record to update Creating, as if
to avoid any confusion.
How about track number 3, Chattering Song?
Birds chatter, lawyers chatter, doctors chatter.
A tree to look into the water, the branch snapped and they fell in the swamp.
So funky.
Does he say let's talk or let's walk?
I'm not sure.
It sounds like let's walk to me, but the part that follows is AF funky. It is so different than what we get on the Sausage record. And I think because it's so different, I really, really like this version of Shattering Song.
It is my favorite track on the tape. It is. I think it's absolutely superb.
Once again, the bass line is much more articulated. It's way more legato with a lot more hammer-ons and pull-offs on the Sausage record because he's playing it faster, for one. They do a little bit more with the drums, and that's part of the reason I chose this clip. They do a little more fancy programming with the drums to give you an idea of what a human drummer would sound like on this track. Once again, Todd's parts are there. That funky dance part in the middle, so rad. I love it so much. Those are little elements of Primus that didn't necessarily shine through, especially after the transition to the trio of Tim, Larry, and Les. And that's not a bad thing or a good thing. It was just a product of their three styles melding. And so we lost a little bit of that, as you can see, from the primordial Primus. What a cool track. And in case you're wondering, Kern the Butter Churn is in this version. It's there. Yeah. This thing is almost complete.
It's been there since the beginning.
Yeah, which makes absolute perfect sense, of course. Kern, first drummer Les ever played with in high school. They were great buddies. Kern got him the key to the church so he could go sing Puppies. There's a lot of Kern connections there.
I keep laughing at something that you said, Josh, when we heard the tunes. You said that we are so accustomed to what the final versions sound like, and we've been listening to them for such a long time that when we play these demos, we kind of turn our heads in disbelief every time we hear the
yeah, there's all these weird little, there's all these strange little things that didn't necessarily make it to finalized versions, and so they are somewhat startling, but the variation is where I'm really finding a lot of pleasure in these demos. And finally, the first song Les Claypool ever made for Primus. It is called Too Many Puppies. As Frankie intimated earlier, many of you have heard some of those bootleg renditions from the mid to late 80s, that double time version of Puppies. And if you haven't heard those early versions of Puppies, sit down, take a sip of water, take a deep breath. Here we go.
Shot in the dark, too many puppies are trained not to bark at the sight of blood that must be spilled so that we may maintain our oil fields. Too many puppies.
Primates, everything all right there? That's Too Many Puppies in its original inception. I can see why Les went to the church now, Frankie. There were a lot of vocal layers in there, especially in the chorus. He really did have to belt it out. It's in the tracks that he kind of pushed back in the mix, but he's letting it rip. You can hear too that the guitar is very understated. And once again, I do believe that's Les playing Ray Wing's guitar and not doing anything too fancy. Whereas Todd would come along and embellish it a bit and come up with a serviceable guitar solo, for sure. The guitar solo on this one is essentially a placeholder.
Totally.
But you called it, you used the word ska on this one. What makes it sound like a ska tune to you?
Could be ignorance. Just anytime I hear something being played fast, I think it's a ska.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't hear anybody yell, "One step beyond!" But maybe I missed that cue in there. No, that double time is so different. And of these, obviously, all four of these tracks are radically altered for a later studio release. However, Puppies, I think, has the greatest change to it, not just because there's a different drummer, or a human drummer for that matter, but the approach. It became a march as opposed to what you just heard. It became a militaristic march with Tim Alexander really driving it and Larry's overdriven guitars putting that edge to it. Each one of these tracks, in its original form, I suppose, or demo form, is quite fascinating. For you true Primus historians out there, you really get a sense of where Les and Todd are coming from as far as their influences and their original plans or vision for this band, which radically changed over time, along with personnel. So what a fascinating look into the earliest days of Primus.
The tracks are absolutely, like you mentioned, there's no other word to describe them. They are fascinating. Nowadays, we know that Primus is one of the most unique sounding bands in the world. But even then, when their sound was radically different, even though the influences are clear and we know what Liz was into, I think it still sounds remarkably unique. I don't think there were that many bands in 1984 performing something like this, right? So,
no.
So this just proves that Primus evolved over the time in a lot of factors, including their sound, their lineup, the themes that they approached on the records, but the originality and the uniqueness, it was there since the beginning, since day one, since the very first note.
They were freaking people out from day one. And that's well documented in the Grapevine book, too, that Todd said people were looking at us like, what the hell are these guys playing? And Adam Gates saw Primus for the first time with Peter Libby, I think in 86 or so, and he even said that these guys were playing some really weird music and didn't think it would go anywhere. Clearly, it took them places. What a wonderful moment to hear these tunes as they were conceived and to just chart where they went with them. We didn't even talk about lyrics and vocal delivery. Obviously, Les's vocal delivery changed over time. He changed it consciously, especially for lineup change that precipitated Suck on This. But some of the lyrics are different too, as far as we can tell, because we can actually make them out on these recordings, as opposed to the sausage recordings that are tough to hear as far as the vocal enunciation goes. But definitely some of these lyrics changed over time too. Really looking forward to getting our audio engineer pal on this, who can really take a look at these recordings, tweak them if necessary, and eventually get them out to you guys.
To highlight one more time my gratitude to the universe, Josh, there are thousands of Primus fans in the world. I feel incredibly lucky to own this museum piece and have it in my collection, considering the window of opportunity to own it was so small. Our conversation about it lasted about an hour or so, I believe. So anyone could have grabbed it and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So thank you, lucky stars, fate, whatever it was, but I'm incredibly thrilled to own this item.
I'm thrilled for you, buddy. I am going to toss out to anybody who's looking for a tape, if you want to expedite the process when you see it posted, just ask this of the seller.
Do you have the damn tape?
And you will get it in record time. Let's leave with this, Frankie. You mentioned that this tape resolves some Primus mysteries, but it also raises others. Here are the mysteries. This is the first Primus demo, and it has tunes we didn't even necessarily know were around at that time. And that is fascinating in and of itself. But it does beg the question, is there a demo, a home tape that contains Ancient Mariner or March of the Elves or Man in the Pinstripe Suit?
I will just toss this out there, Josh.
Yeah.
1 out of 6.
Define that for me.
Primate 1984 is 1 out of 6 Primus tapes that predate Suck on This. That's all I will say.
1 out of 6. Okay. Anything can happen with the other 5. I mean, we know some of them, but we don't know all of them. Primates, Primatrons, good people of Earth, thank you so much for listening. Really looking forward to sharing these full versions when we can, or distributing this piece of Primus history to everybody. Let's talk more demos next time, Frankie.
we still have quite a lot of ground to cover in terms of primordial Primus, Josh, and it is a very, very exciting area to discuss.
Primate demo, you've been tracked. Next time, we will welcome you back to this world. Later days!
Willie Mays.
You have the damn tape!